Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. As always, thank you so much for being here. I hope that you and your loved ones are safe and well and doing all you can to maintain your mental fortitude. I know we're living in trying times right now, and I'm thinking of you, and I am rooting for you, and I know that we will come out of this stronger. And I also recognize that it's messy, right, in the middle. So I just wanted to start the episode by saying that. I live in Montana, which if you've ever been here, you know that it's a pretty socially isolated state anyway. So, it's been relatively easy, I think, in comparison to how a lot of people are living for us to socially isolate. And yet, it's also been a huge challenge. Having a 10-year-old at home while I work full-time has been a big shift. And the things that we do, of course, like everybody, have been massively constrained. I got an email the other day from my son's parkour facility. If you don't know what parkour is, it's really kind of like urban gymnastics. It's, you see the guys jumping across park benches and over buildings and those kinds of things. That's essentially parkour. And my son's been involved in it for 5 years. And I feel very blessed to live in a place in Montana that has a pretty remarkable parkour facility because they're uncommon as it is. And we're just really fortunate to have one here. Anyway, I got an email yesterday that they're closing. And I have to tell you, that was just a really tough moment for me because it's kind of my son's world. So anyway, I know that all kinds of things similar to that are happening in your world. And I just feel ya. And I really do think we're going to get through this. We're going to be stronger for it. It's just really hard to be in the middle of it. And that's kind of where we are right now. So moving on to today's topic, last week we talked all about the value of the rumble in terms of the change process. And in summary, what I talked about in the last episode is that health is a relationship with self that needs to be nurtured. And it's really a practice of writing some decisions that we've made in our lifetime, or a lot of decisions that we've made in our lifetime, and sort of redirecting habits that may no longer be serving us and probably never did. So the reason I call it the rumble is because I really feel that it is a rumble between who we have been and ultimately who we want to be that changes our life. So a rumble is just a part of the change process. And today, I want to talk about what it truly means to rise up in your own life. If you followed my work for any length of time, you know by now that I think there's a lot more to the health equation than just food and exercise. Those are important elements, of course, of the health equation, but by no means are they the only components. In fact, the entire reason I started the Grace and Grit podcast over 4 years ago was to help women explore ways of improving health beyond the eat less, exercise more ideology that's been crammed down our throats for years. Health, in my very humble opinion, is a process of healing. Not just your physiology, but very much the psychology that drives your behaviors. Because your behaviors, of course, directly influence your physiology. In other words, health is a process of being willing to go in and take a very close look at why you do what you do. Now, as someone who spent the first decade of her career really heavily immersed in the fitness industry, and then the second half, or the second decade, immersed heavily in the health coaching industry, I'm really more convinced than ever that deep health is only possible when you're willing to do deep inner work. Inner work is a practice of acknowledging the parts of yourself that you'd rather the rest of the world just didn't know about, right? The fear, the shame, the frustration, the doubt, the disappointment. Inner work is allowing yourself to hone in on why you do what you do, not just what you do. And what I mean by that specifically is I have clients all the time asking me questions like, should I eat this? How should I exercise? They're asking a lot about the what. What should I do? And when I get asked that question, I always reroute my clients to first and foremost think about what their intention is behind doing the thing in the first place. So, should I eat cake this weekend? I don't know. Why are you eating it? Why do you want to eat it? Right? Is it your grandfather's birthday and you're baking a cake that he loves and you really want to share in that experience with him? I would say go for it and enjoy the hell out of it. Go slow, stay mindful, and really be present with it. But if you're eating the cake mindlessly because you're trying to avoid feeling some other emotion, I would say maybe eating the cake isn't such a great idea. Should I drink alcohol? I don't know. Why are you inspired to drink the alcohol, right? What's motivating you wanting to drink? Is it because you're not comfortable with who you are if you don't drink? Are you drinking because it's how you manage stress? Or, is your best friend coming to town who you haven't seen in 10 years and you want to share a glass of wine with her? There's a difference in those scenarios. So why you do what you do is everything. And at the end of the day, the really big question to be asking yourself is, do I like my reasons for doing what I did today? So when it comes to inner work, a lot of people say, Courtney, everything you just described doesn't sound very fun. Right? And who's got time for that? Who's got time to go in and get to know themselves? And I get it, right? It doesn't sound fun. And truth be told, it often isn't. It's really no wonder why we hyper-focus on the easier stuff, like the latest diet program or, the latest and greatest exercise program to try to take back control of our health. And some of you might be hearing me say that and thinking, well, I don't think it's easy to diet. I don't think it's easy to, do an exercise program. But in comparison to going in and getting to know your motives, it's a lot easier to focus on those things. If you truly want to feel at peace with how you are living your life, going in is not optional. It's really the required admission. Going in and getting to know yourself is how you take radical responsibility for where you are in your life right now. It's how you decide what needs to be renovated in the areas that you feel are misaligned. It's how you establish a game plan for turning behaviors around that aren't serving you. And it's also how you start to show up daily to do the work you have called yourself to do. And no, it will not be a clean and always joyful process. And it most certainly won't be linear. It will be wildly imperfect, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't learn a darn thing. And that is why we call it the rumble. I'll be honest, the clients that I worry about the most that I work with are the ones who never rumble, who execute everything perfectly all the time. That concerns me because I wonder what they're actually learning. I don't learn when I execute things perfectly. I learn when I'm making a whole lot of mistakes and figuring out what does work. My husband and I, of course, we live in Montana, so we do like to ski. And early on in our relationship, we would ski all the time. And my husband would say to me, "Babe, you're not falling enough. Like, if you aren't falling, you're not skiing hard enough." And that's kind of how I think about the change process, specifically with our health, right? If you aren't messing up, if you aren't making mistakes, and if you're doing it perfectly all the time, I would argue that you're not really working on the things that probably are going to change you in the deepest way. So I want to ask you today, are you doing inner work? Or are you avoiding inner work by reaching for yet another Band-Aid? And what I mean by that is, are you signing up for yet another diet or exercise program that you will eventually abandon like all the others? For a very long time, I will tell you, I was most definitely not willing to do inner work. I was willing to go anywhere but in. Give me the meal plan. Give me the new interval training program. Give me a new movement skill to focus on. Anything that will help distract me from what's truly going on. Give me anything that will help me to change the appearance of my body from the outside, but ultimately keep everything the same on the inside. The problem is that's a very faulty approach. Because without changing the inside, very specifically how you think, how you manage your emotions, you will never sustain whatever accolades you accomplish anyway. The brain does not like reality to be mismatched from what's going on with your thinking. And this is largely, in my opinion, why diets don't work. Not only do diets ask you to take extreme measures in short time frames, that's one problem. But another problem is a lot of diets do not address reworking how we think. So you very well may, get some great results on a diet. You might lose 20, 30, 40 pounds. And then we all know what happens. A year later, you gain it all back plus some. Why is that? Because you never changed your thought process. You never changed how you think about yourself, how you think about food, how you think about exercise. You never really improved your relationship with yourself. You just followed a list of rules and regulations. So, for years, I operated in the space of knowing that the inner work was important. Like, I could theoretically wrap my head around that. And yet, I was simultaneously avoiding it in every possible way for a lot of reasons. Looking at my inner landscape, specifically my mental landscape, meant spending time that I didn't feel like I had, feeling things that I didn't want to feel. So denial and avoidance seemed like way better strategies than trying to understand my dark side, which is what I like to call it. Except they weren't better strategies. Because the consequences I was paying to feel temporarily better, which in my case looked like drinking, quite a bit of alcohol during the week, eating sugar, specifically, a lot of carbohydrates in my diet, it had a lot of consequences. But eventually, and this is what I see happen with a lot of women, the discomfort of not doing the inner work became far more painful than the discomfort of engaging with it. because I was so tired of being on the hamster wheel, of reaching for the next thing, right? Of never really feeling like I was getting anywhere, just creating temporary success. So I rerouted myself. And what I mean by that is I literally did a U-turn back into myself. So I stopped looking out there for all the answers, and I started to go in for the answers. And I'm not going to lie. At first, awareness really sucks. Getting to know yourself is not always like a joy-filled, fun experience. I was teaching the Consistency Code, which is a program, of course, all about consistency, back in February. And the first week is completely dedicated to the practice of awareness. And at the end of the week, I did a group coaching call, and one of the students said to me, "Courtney, why do I feel worse?" Right? Like we spent this whole week on awareness of what was truly going on in our lives, and she was feeling worse, not better. And my response was, it's exactly how it works. Because you start realizing that the very thing that has been standing in your way the entire time is you. You start recognizing that your excuses and rationalizations really have no merit. So that can be a very hard pill to swallow. Also, when we allow ourselves to start going in, we kind of heighten our awareness of what's really going on. It's really easy to get overwhelmed by all the things that you could be doing to renovate your life. And when we feel overwhelmed, I've spoken about this before on the podcast, but the feeling of overwhelm really just creates a state of paralysis. You're not really going to take action that matters from a place of overwhelm. And so I see women often spinning out in a place of overwhelm for years because there's so much to clean up in their life, they don't even know where to start. But here's the truth. Just start. It's like going into a really messy house, right? Like, let's just say you're a landlord and you go into a house that some tenants just left and it's a disaster. You don't sit there and create big dramatic storylines about you don't know where to start and you don't spin out about it for weeks and months and years. Maybe you do, but most people wouldn't, right? What do? You go get a garbage bag and some cleaning supplies and you just start. You just get a few tools and you just begin. Doesn't matter where. It really doesn't. What matters is that you start cleaning. Another reason that I was really resistant to doing inner work is I was afraid that I couldn't handle what I found. And this is something that I hear clients speak to time and time again, that they're so afraid if they actually go in and acknowledge what's going on and they allow themselves to start feeling a lot of the emotion they've been avoiding for years, it's going to be like just a faucet that they can't turn off. And I definitely can relate to that because I thought, that if I started to feel some of the stuff and stand face to face with some of the stuff that I was rumbling with, I was just going to crawl under the covers and never come out. But that's not what happened. And that's honestly rarely what I see happen, if ever, with my clients. I also thought that by going in, I think one of the reasons I resisted it was I was going to be so filled with disappointment and regret. And one of the things that saved me in that was really just this concept, which again, I've spoken to many times on this podcast, of staying curious rather than judgmental. So before I went in, I just made the commitment to myself that I had my own back. That whatever I saw, whatever I found, I was going to be able to deal with it. And I wasn't going to make it mean anything bad about myself. Because the meaning that we place on things is where we get ourselves into a whole lot of trouble, ladies. So curiosity is your friend. Judgment never is. Judgment, again, like a lot like overwhelm, is just going to have you shut down. So I'll tell you, the journey of going in, thinking about my thinking, better understanding my emotional landscape has been really hard and tender. It's been at many times, incredibly disorienting and really insightful. It's been a little bit heartbreaking, and it's been really heart-opening. And it has been absolutely 150% worth it. Why? Because I feel more sure-footed than I have really at any other point in my life. Not because I know everything is going to work out the way I want it to, but because I know that I'm capable of handling it if it doesn't. And that feels amazing. My mental and physical health, I believe, are better than they've ever been. And I am definitely not at my leanest weight. So, I definitely could lean into getting to my leanest weight, but I will tell you at my leanest weight, I was not my happiest. I did not feel my best. And I also felt like what it took me to get there required all of the bandwidth in my brain. And quite frankly, I'm not willing to spend all of my bandwidth on that, because there's way more important things in my life that I want to dedicate time and energy to. Going in allowed me to improve my marriage. And I'll tell you the main reason why that's true is because I stopped expecting my husband to make me happy. Going in allowed me to take that role over myself, because that's really my work, and that's your work too. So when I stopped, putting this expectation on him to behave a certain way to make me, feel good about my life or good about myself, it shifted everything. My job is more fulfilling. I've always loved what I do. But for a long, long time, I was definitely stuck in a space of feeling like I had to do everything perfectly. And when I failed, I made it mean a lot of horrible things. But now I stopped. I no longer make failure mean anything about me. I don't make it mean I'm defective or not smart enough. I just make it mean that there's something I'm not understanding, or there's something wrong with my strategy. And those things can be solved. Really, my life is all around just more fulfilling because I started to take responsibility for everything in it. For the way that I really perceive everything in it. And that has made all of the difference. And I have seen it make all of the difference with my clients as well. So last week I mentioned how Brené Brown talks about the importance of being willing to rumble with our lives, right? And she defines rumbling as unleashing curiosity, poking, prodding, and exploring the ins and outs of our story. Because we have conjured up some pretty incredible stories, my friends. But when we start peeling away the layers and doing that poking and prodding and exploring, it gives us an opportunity to rewrite the story. So I believe that rumbling, which I spoke really deeply into last week, is very similar to getting in the arena, in the ring, with grief and vulnerability and failure and expectations and perfectionism and trust and shame and integrity and every other hard emotion, if you want to put a label on it. So we can stop numbing ourselves and hiding from emotion, and really learn how to befriend them, all of them. Right? There is no such thing as good and bad emotion. There's just emotion. And the spectrum of human emotion is very wide and expansive, and we are supposed to feel it all. But we don't, do we? And especially living in a culture that really promotes that we should be happy and bubbly all the time. We do a lot of things to avoid one whole half of the spectrum. So I personally am learning over and over again that not stepping into the ring with difficult emotions actually brings more pain into my life than the difficult emotion that I'm trying to avoid in the first place. Learning how to feel emotion is so stinking important. And man, like if we could teach this in elementary schools, I think we'd be living in a very different world. I am committed these days to a practice of stepping in the ring with difficult emotion and granting myself permission to rumble with them. Not until the death, but until I feel I have actually come back to life. Giving myself permission to rumble, to feel, is how I also grant myself permission to rise and do better. Rumbling requires humility, courage, honesty, a lot of hard work, persistence, and patience. And rising to new heights in our life is the byproduct of rumbling. The rise is where we return home to ourselves. It's where we start trusting in who we are and in our ability to do hard things. The rise is where we start to live our most authentic and confident lives. And that is really my hope for every single client I work with, that we can move them into a space of rising, right? Returning home to who they truly are and feeling like they are living a life that is so well in alignment with who they know themselves to be. So no matter how far away from home base you feel right now, what matters the most is that you're willing each and every day to step into the ring, rumble, and rise to the occasion that is your life. That is how you find your way back to yourself in a world filled with noise and distraction. So I want to tell you that I am offering a free masterclass in the next couple of days. Obviously, if you listen to this podcast episode months later, that opportunity will be past. But as of April 19th, 2020, I am running 3 different, it was the same masterclass, but I'm running it on 3 different dates. And the title of the masterclass is 3 Simple Shifts to Ditch Diet Culture and Radically Improve Your Health. And we're going to go a lot deeper into a lot of what I've been talking about for the past couple of weeks. I'm a really big believer that one of the very reasons we are so unhealthy as a culture is because we aren't willing to go in, right? I hope I kind of made my case for that in this episode today. And we really need to learn how to take a close look at why we do what we do. We've kind of been conditioned to, just look outside of ourselves and find someone else who can tell us what to do. And that may work for a while, but it doesn't really work for long-term sustainability because you don't get to know yourself and you don't at all feel self-directed. And so if that list of rules and regulations doesn't work or stops working, you feel like you have to go to the next thing or the next person who can tell you what to do. And I think the only way we will ever be truly healthy is to actually operate from a space of being self-directed. So we're going to talk about a lot of things in this Masterclass, I'm going to be talking about how we define health and why that really matters. I'm going to be talking about the strategies that we use and give you some tips and tricks on strategies that are far more helpful. And I'm also going to be talking a lot about, how to stay the course and what consistency really means and how to change our thought process to actually promote consistency in our behavior. So if you are a woman who knows that there's got to be a better way to improve your health than doing yet another diet, if you are a woman who is ready to stand face to face with the behaviors that are no longer serving you and probably never did, if you are a woman who wants to feel confident in her ability to show up for herself with more consistency and ease, I would definitely encourage you to sign up for this masterclass. So it's really easy to do if you just head on over to graceandgrit.com/ditch the diet. Once again, graceandgrit.com/ditch the diet. And of course, alongside of this masterclass, I am opening the doors to my membership site. This is the first time ever that we've opened our membership site to the general public. So this feels very exciting. And the entire purpose of me ever developing a membership site was to really cultivate a space for women who are really ready to ditch diet culture and embrace self-leadership, specifically in the health arena. So I'm giving away a lot of good prizes during this and all kinds of goodness. So if you are on my email list, you will find out all about those things. And one of the ways you can get on my email list is register for the masterclass. So one more time, it's just graceandgrit.com/ditch the diet. All right, my friends, I hope you got something out of that today. I hope you got a little kick in your step and you are ready to live an awesome day. And I hope to see you again very soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story. And it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort. And with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.